In part one, on the next episode of Painting and Travel, Sarah tours an Amish Carriage building workshop in Shipshewana, Indiana. Using acrylics, Roger paints a rolling countryside landscape and includes one of the hand-built horse-drawn buggies.
Welcome to Shipshewana, Indiana. We're standing in front of the Miller Carriage Company, and this is where you get your buggy replaced or repaired. It's a really beautiful small town in northern Indiana, and we have the pleasure of being here on a really gorgeous day. So I'll show you around a little bit, and we'll meet the owner shortly.
I took a lot of reference photographs in Shipshewana, and this is the one I've decided to use today. And I'll be using a 16 by 20 inch piece of masonite, and I toned this with some warm colors, some basically burnt sienna on here, just to get rid of that white to start with. And this burnt sienna color gives me a good warm undertone, especially for things like landscapes. And I'll be using acrylics today, and on my palette I have titanium white, ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium red light, cadmium yellow deep, cadmium yellow light, and I have some earth colors here: yellow ochre, raw sienna, and burnt umber. Now the colors on a palette are always a personal choice, but basically what I have here today are my three primary colors: blue, red, and yellow, and then I have these earth colors. Now these earth colors, I really consider them sort of convenience colors because I can make this yellow ochre or burnt sienna and the burnt umber by using a mixture of these primary colors here. But it does take a while to mix those colors. In fact, let me show you right now. So let me take some yellow ochre here. I'll wash my brush, and I'll try and mix with my primary colors here the same yellow ochre. Now I call these convenience colors because it does take a little bit of time to mix these exactly to match the yellow ochre, but it can be done. I think I'll just speed things along here with a camera so you can see this. I may not get it exactly right, but pretty close. Okay, you can see that's pretty close to that yellow ochre. So these are really convenient to have on the palette, so I don't have to just mix these every time. Now the raw sienna, if I mix the yellow ochre and the burnt sienna, I'll pretty much get this raw sienna as well. But when I'm in the field, I often use just the primary colors. It does simplify things especially when I'm outdoors. But of course, palette choices of colors are always a personal choice, and you know, I often mix it up. And sometimes I use a lot of colors, sometimes I don't use too many at all. Okay, let's get to this painting. I'm using a large brush, a 1-inch brush, and I'm going to start to block in with these large shapes, the large patterns to the painting. Now this is really so fundamental to any painting, is to block in the large shapes first and not worry about any detail. Now this burnt sienna underneath is very advantageous because, as you can see, as I scumble this paint on here, a lot of these warm colors will show through. And that just makes life a lot easier to have something, a warm tone underneath these paintings to begin with. Now these colors may be off somewhat. I change them as I go along, and that's another reason for not wanting to put in detail right away, because things change as the painting progresses. But what I try to do as best I can is to get the right values. That's the right lightness or darkness of the paint here. I want to get that as close I can to the right value. So I don't want it too dark or too light. I'm working from my reference photograph over here. And so I generally try and put in the darks first. In this case, I started with this large area. But now let's put in these very dark passages of the painting. And if I want to get very dark areas, I try and stay with my transparent colors. The transparent colors would be the ultramarine blue, the alizarin crimson, and the either Indian yellow or cadmium yellow deep. The other colors here are opaque, and they generally have white in them. So if I use those, the opaque colors, I won't get nearly as dark a look here. Now see how dark that is? And also I can see that nice warm color of the burnt sienna showing through. See, rough brushwork like this can really give a nice edge to the painting. I'm going to lose this edge, of course, because I'm going to have to put in the sky. Keep going with these dark colors. I have a fence over here, and I did pencil this in with a pastel pencil to get my composition. And I'm losing some of that, like the fences here, but that's all right. Okay, we have another dark tree back here, and one back here. Here we have the carriage, the Amish carriage. And we'll be visiting the carriage shop a little bit later on in the program. Right now I'm not very concerned with the colors, just the values. Kind of want to get the basic color, of course, but mostly the values here. Now there's a house back in here. I lost my little drawing back there. That's all right too. This is the stage of the painting that goes very fast. It's always the quickest part of the painting. And I try and keep it that way. I try and keep it sort of loose, no detail at all, just big shapes, big large areas. Okay, here we have the road. There's a nice shadow across the road. There's some other shadows here and there on the road. I'm getting some paint on my drawing board here. These are acrylics, but easy way to clean that off is just with some alcohol. We'll clean off that acrylic paint. Okay, so that's my darks. Basically I have the middle tones by this burnt sienna on here. Now let me dip into the white and we'll put the sky in. And one thing about dealing with photographs like this is when a photograph is taken like this where we've got a lot of darks and a lot of lights, in other words a very bright sky and a lot of deep shadows, I'm going to lose a lot of the color in the photograph. So if I were doing a painting outside on location, I would probably, or most likely, see that sky as bluer. It could be warmer or something, but I would most likely see some clouds in it. But that all gets sort of washed out in a photograph. And that's one of the disadvantages of working with photographs. You just can't get that range of colors and values in a photograph like you can see in real life. That's why it's so important and good to work outside on location. But what we have today is a photograph to work from, so that's what we'll do. I'm going to make that sky a rather warm sky, I think. So I'm mixing up kind of a warm color here. I'm not going to put in a blue sky. This is late in the day, so the sky would most likely be sort of a warm color. Now this really starts to establish the pattern and the composition of the painting. Now, having all those big basic shapes placed in, now I can start to adjust the colors and the values within these large shapes. This is what I call the foundation of the painting. Right now I can see this dark area down here of the grass. This part needs to be a little more intense, a little bit lighter. And acrylics, I mean, see that it dries so very fast. And that's one advantage of working with acrylics. But it does take some time to get used to that fast drying acrylics. If you haven't used acrylics very much, it can be an issue and a problem. But with some practice and some experience, it can work as a pretty good advantage. I often work with acrylics, especially out in the field, simply because I don't have to carry around wet canvases with oil paints on them. And the other advantage, of course, is I can put one color over another and they won't mix together. So it prevents me from getting dirty, muddy colors. Now I'll go back up to these trees. They're one big blocky mass right now. I can go into these and begin to refine them. I don't want to lose that big shape there. I consider this one big shape. So I don't want to lose that one big shape, but I want to refine the shapes within the large shape. So I can have multiple shapes within this larger shape. But I don't want to break that larger shape up into too many other separate pieces. You see, if this were oil paints, these would all be mixing together and I'd be getting a totally different look and a totally different color to this. Right back here is in the distance, so I'm picking up cerulean blue, touch of white, because I want to push that in the background. So further things go back, they'll get a little bit paler and a little bit cooler. And I still have that burnt sienna and the dark color there underneath showing through. And that gives me some nice texture to the painting. I'm not sure that's the right color yet. I have to adjust this all the time because when I put one color on like this, it affects the way I think about another color on the painting. So I have to keep going back and forth to different areas of the painting and keep adjusting it a little bit at a time. Now, some artists can work on one corner of the painting and just complete it totally all the way down, or start from the middle and work out. But I tend to want to work this way, where I sort of work the whole painting at once. Everybody works a little bit different. All right, I'm going to take my earth colors with some alizarin crimson, maybe a touch of blue, make some of these even warmer. I'm going to go back to the sky right now. And this was put on, of course, very quickly, but it didn't cover very well. And that happens with acrylics. Often they don't cover very well on the first go around. So we'll mix up that color again, and I'll put a second coat on there. And this time I'll really lay it on there so it covers. And I want to get that sky on there because then I can work again on the edges of those trees. All right, now after I put that on there, just sort of haphazardly, then I'll take a light touch of the brush and I'll go over that and see, I'll just smooth those areas out so I don't see any of my brush marks. Now the reason I want to do that is because I want all my texture to show up in here, but I don't want a competing texture to show up in the sky. So I want to keep that nice and flat. And we'll put some sky holes in here. We'll refine these more and more as we go along. So I think that should do it for the sky. We'll let that sky dry a while, and then I'll go back and I'll soften the edges and define the edges of these trees.
This is the Carriage shop of John Miller, and he's having a very busy day producing carriages from scratch. I know that you probably have different stations set up as to how you start building the carriage, and I'm wondering if you'll take a little time and tell us how they're made.
Like we do the woodworking up here, like just the bodies, basically the body of the carriage. We'll do a bunch at a time.
So this is the body of the carriage, and you start with this because everything happens from here on?
Yeah.
What's the next step after this?
Well, we'll put a seat on it.
A seat,
Yeah, just like that one is.
Oh, yes. And I was wondering how many years you've been making these lovely carriages.
I've been making probably 20 years.
And about how many days do people come here to work on these before you have one finished?
Probably 3 weeks, start to finish.
So if I want to order one, I have to wait about 3 weeks?
No, I'm booked out for a year.
You're booked out for a year. And this looks like it's a two-seater.
Yeah.
So a family with 3 or 4 children could fit in this one?
Yeah, 5 or 6.
5 or
Small
6.
Kids, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you also do repairs here?
Yeah, a lot of repairs.
What wears out the most?
Wheels and probably the doors. This wears out, you know.
Oh, I see. And on the wheel, the part that wears out, is it this top coat?
Probably the rubber, yeah, rubber tire. But occasionally the whole wheel gets loose, needs attention. It's a little bit of an art to do that. It's not just anybody that does that.
I'll bet it is, because there are lots of spokes and each one has to be in the right position or you won't have a good wheel. Up here we have the wheel attic, and it stores the wooden wheels of all different sizes. The natural light comes in, and it's very pretty up here, just as its own still life. This room, you finish up the interior and you do some wiring and some lighting. Do you have nighttime lights then?
Some will be flashing for visibility. Then you'll have some lights that for yourself to see, you know.
And what are your choices for the interior? I see this one has 2 seats. Will you have matching interior for both seats, or?
You just basically pick out the color. There's fabric or vinyl.
I see, so I guess that's up here.
Yeah, that'd be the vinyl up there.
And then you can measure it out, and you have this big cutting table.
Yeah.
And tell me about the door, because that's interesting to me. I hadn't really thought about the door part. This pulls down?
This pulls down, yeah. It's got a aluminum a track here.
A track.
Just like an overhead door.
And this would help a lot in cold weather. It would keep out the wind.
It's
and pretty airtight.
Yeah.
And then in summer, you've got more of the convertible style. John, I know you also have some supplies here. Do people contact you from other parts of the U.S. for supplies?
Yes, we ship all over the United States. We're known for a one-stop buggy shop. We got all the parts that you need for carriages and buggies. So we have a lot of parts we ship out UPS.
One-stop buggy shop.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's our logo.
It was very nice speaking with you, John. Thanks for your time. I love seeing the carriage shop. It's really very special.
Let me pick up my atomizer here. Using acrylics, this is a very, very handy tool to use when using acrylics. I often spray my board, but I spray the palette as well to keep those paints wet. All right, we have some lighter passages down here by the road where there's some sunlight hitting those edges. There's a building back here in the photograph, and I'll put that in later, but I'm not afraid to leave things out of my painting. There are some paintings where I want to put in everything, but often I get in more trouble by trying to put in everything than I do by leaving something out. I like to keep a painting simple Simplification on a painting is always a good idea for me, to keep things simple. With some dark colors, ultramarine blue and burnt umber, I'll put in the Amish carriage here. I'm just going to block this in as one large shape for now. And then later on in the painting, I'll add some detail to that. But I'm really still in the blocking in stage of the painting. Now, since this carriage is really a center of interest to the painting, I'm going to make that fairly dark so it shows up nicely against the lighter part of the road. And we have a shadow of the carriage too going off the side of the road. Now in my photograph, that carriage is dead center. So what I've done is I've moved the carriage to the right side of the road. Otherwise it would have been about here. So I've just moved it over slightly just to put it just off center some. Makes a little bit better composition. Often it's very difficult to know what color something is. It's very difficult for me. For instance, this road here, I'm looking at the photograph and it's very hard for me to determine whether it's really a cool color or a warm color. It's just so neutral, but it is something. I can't just mix black and white and put a gray down there because that's not it either. But I think that color is warm, and really naturally it would be because that part of the road is being lit by the sun, and that would make it a warm color. So I'll take my raw sienna, mix a little bit of that in with the white, and we'll warm that up some. So you can see the difference right now. This sky is slightly cooler and this is slightly warmer. So I think that works. That's what I mean about adjusting colors all the time as the painting moves forward. And back here we have that light as well. I'm going to spray my board. That will help this wet paint to flow over the dry paint. Just slides right over it easy when I spray it. Back here it can be a little cooler than up here because this is in the distance. Just like the trees, they become cooler in the distance. So can this road as compared to this part of the road in the foreground. This can be slightly cooler. And here we have this light patch of highway coming over here, and that grass would be light as well, just to follow that same pattern. You have to be careful here. I don't want to get these patterns too symmetrical. I don't want them to be like just one right after the other. So I have to think about that and vary those as I go. I don't want long stretches of grass down here. I want to break that up with the smaller patches, sort of like dappled sunlight. And I'm going to make this part of the painting down here in the foreground very dark. I just sort of want that to sort of recede and sort of disappear from view. I don't want too much attention down here. I want to really play this part of the painting down. So I'll just make that darker in shadow. It'll make those patches of sunlight stand out more, especially if this is a little bit darker. Take some blue and yellow and just add a touch of dark green in there. I haven't put any green out on my palette. I can mix all the greens I need just with those colors there. Sometimes I put the greens out and sometimes I don't. The important thing here is that I've kept this as one big shape. I haven't broken it up into so many other small shapes that I lose this big shape. And this tree in the very background there, this one here, I'm going to warm that up, almost try and make it kind of give it a fall look with some very warm colors. Now, even though that is in the background, and anything in the background will sort of get bluer with the atmosphere, I want that tree, it's just sort of a beautiful tree. I just want to give that an autumn feel. And in here, let's take the cerulean blue and a bit of the red. And let's give a few of these others kind of a purple look. Especially on this side where the tree will be in shadow. And I'll echo a few of those colors and tones right over in here. That'll just give this painting some harmony to echo some of these colors. I've got a bit of my sky color still left on here, and I'm going to touch in a few more negative areas. It's easy to get carried away with too many negative areas, so I have to sort of hold myself back from doing too much there. All right, now let's approach it in the other direction. Instead of taking the sky down into the tree, we'll take the tree up into the sky. We'll start with that warm fall-looking tree there, and just with the edge of my brush, just going to flip these areas up into the sky. Now the sky is dry here, so I don't have to worry about that dark color mixing with the sky color. And let's move over to the next tree, which is a little cooler, a little bit more blue in here. And I'll just flip this up the same way. Now, if I want, I can still go back with more sky color and put in more sky holes down here. Just kind of back and forth until I get it the way I think it should be. All right, that's all I can do for today, so we'll pick it up next time where we left off, and we'll put in all the finishing touches.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.